I'm going to tell you about some chapels where I've particularly enjoyed preaching, and I'm going to tell you why I particularly enjoyed preaching in those chapels. But I will not include chapels where I have been a minister or where I have been a member. One which stands in my memory as particularly precious and also formative is this little chapel in Haslingfield, and this is what I wrote in my autobiography. In the afternoon, we would take hand-copied maps of the villages and attempt to visit every house and invite the people to the chapel that evening. In this way, we visited the Methodist Chapel, Haslingfield, 3 times, being generously provided with tea by a lady of the congregation. The second occasion saw some 40 people, almost filling the small chapel. Philip went there alone one Sunday evening to visit a contact, a girl called Elaine. Walked Elaine home, pointing her to Christ as they went. They turned aside into a bus shelter and read the scriptures by the streetlight. Then he spread his coat on the floor and knelt with her as she responded to the gospel invitation. I first preached there in 1966. A precious memory, wonderful services, wonderful atmosphere. In 1970, I preached in La Neuville, not really a chapel as such, but nonetheless a place set aside for worship, inside the room where you see that notice in the window. And this is what I wrote in my autobiography. On Tuesday, I preached at La Neuville. In the afternoon, at a Christian's farm at Le Creux de l'Ocle, I went to a hayloft above a cattle shed to prepare. I could look through its door to the hillside, and there was the quiet jangle of bells hung round the necks of heifers. And God was there. I wrote, preachers aren't made in churches. They are made alone with God. In the evening, there was a felt presence of the Lord, and some seemed to lap up the word, to be grateful and refreshed as I ministered on the theme of living under the new covenant, and the spirit of the new covenant, and not living in the spirit of the old covenant by keeping many unscriptural rules. As soon as you walked in to that room, even before the service began, there was a sense that God was there. There was an anointing upon that service, which is precious to me to this day. I've never forgotten it. I used to love preaching at Dunks Green. I first preached there in 1972. And again, there was a warmth and a vibrancy, if you like, a light, almost, not visibly, but a sense of light and love and fervour in that chapel, which made it a pleasure, privilege, a joy, something to look forward to when I was appointed as the preacher. Sutton at Home. I think I probably preached there first in 1973, but it may have been earlier than that. And once again, there was a sense of God's presence, a sense of love for the Lord and love for the preacher, and an appreciation of the service, which made it, again, something to look forward to and something to enjoy and savour and cherish and appreciate. Now in Bethel, at Crevaer, there was only a small residual Welsh congregation meeting in a side room, not enough of them to make it worth using the large chapel. It's hard to say, all these years later, for I preached there first in 1978, it's hard to say what it was that made it feel special, but it was a warm, welcoming atmosphere that made one pleased to be there and made it easy to preach, so that the preaching felt fluent, felt from the heart, felt relaxed in one sense, humanly, and yet felt real. Now at Zion Penakai, I preached from 1982 until shortly before the COVID epidemic broke out. There you see both the inside and the outside. One thing I often thought at that chapel was that the singing must have been every bit as vibrant and lively as any singing that might have happened in the pub over the road. Conversation after the service about the sermon, and always a welcome. A great privilege to have preached there during all those years. Rosamedra. If you read the Primitive Methodist magazine of 1835, you will read that there was preaching in Rosamedra, a large congregation developed, land was obtained, and a chapel began to be built. It was opened on the 7th of July, 1833. The society grew, and the children were obliged to leave to make room as the chapel was too small. Well, they began to build a new chapel in 1840. And there you see it, inside on the left, outside on the right. And I was booked to preach there yesterday, as I speak to you now, but there had been serious damage to the chapel by recent heavy rain, and no service was held. And the fear has been voiced that maybe the chapel will never be reopened. Well, if that happens, a light will go out that was lit nearly 200 years ago. And although the congregation recently was down to about 10 people, yet there was always love for the Lord and love for hearing his word, which made it a privilege to be part of that congregation as I stood in the pulpit and they sat in the pew and then afterwards conversed and appreciated what had been shared from the scriptures. Now in Blaenavon, the reason for my enjoyment was quite different from in these other places, although I'm not saying, of course, that they don't love the Lord and that they don't appreciate his word. If you read Lewis Browning's Brief History of Blaenavon, Monmouthshire, which was published in 1906, you will see he says that Wesleyans of those days appeared to live in a warmer climate religiously than those of more modern days. There was more fervour and apparent earnestness in the services. Now, the chapel I just showed you is not Wesleyan, but my family were Wesleyan. And my family, or various members of them, lived in Blaenavon for a period of about 100 years, 1830s to about 1930. My father was born there. Here you see my grandfather and my father, who was one of his 14 children. And my father always spoke with great affection and warmth of the community in Blaenavon. My grandfather and father were both coal miners, and that was a dangerous occupation. There were many deaths, many accidents in the mines. But within the community there was mutual trust, mutual support, and it was a vibrant community, a vibrant town, not only in its religion. And so throughout his life, my father spoke with such affection. And when I was invited to preach at that chapel you just saw in Blaenavon in 2001, I felt I was on the edge of something which formed part of my roots, my own personality, my own heritage, and it was a pleasure to be there. Now, Overton, very similar to what I've said about other places. Now there is only a small and residual congregation, and yet they're always appreciative. The singing has often been vibrant, conversation afterwards about the sermon, a real sense of welcome, a real sense that they're pleased to have me there and to have me minister to them from the Word of God. 2014 was my first visit. Talon Green. I preached there in 2017 and continued to preach there until shortly before the COVID epidemic broke out. Listen to how that congregation was in its early days. Here are extracts from the writings of two ministers. William Fitzgerald, 1833. February. I arrived at the place before the time and it was crowded with people. After the meeting, the people would not go away, so we formed 2 praying companies. The people prayed, and sinners cried for mercy, and the friends told me that many were converted to God. Truly, this was a powerful meeting. And then some years later, 1849 and 50, December the 30th, nearly as soon as we had started to pray, a man cried, "Lord, save me." I exhorted him to believe instantly for salvation. He complied and shortly exclaimed, I'm glad I never thought there was so much happiness in religion as I now feel." Near him knelt a young man who beseeched God for mercy and was soon comforted. Not far from the latter, a young woman believed and was justified. On January the 1st, 1850, I beheld 6 fresh penitents obtain redemption. My soul thirsts for the salvation of precious souls. And preaching in that church, I sometimes felt that there was still some embers from that early fire that were glowing there, and that one could sense in the service. And I remember on one occasion, with a good organist and a good organ, it was, as they say, as if we raised the roof, as we sang The Old Rugged Cross. At Knowlton I preached only once, again shortly before the COVID epidemic. Only a small congregation, and now the chapel has been closed forever. Whether by decision of the local people or whether by some centralised denominational decision, I don't know. But look what somebody has pinned on the notice board of the closed down chapel. "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land." Even in closure, there was that feeling of the need for prayer and revival and a new touch from God. But I felt when I went there that the Lord was there, and there was that warmth and that welcome that one so often cherishes. Lea Bridges. I got to Lea Bridges early on the one occasion that I have preached there, because I didn't know how long it would take me to get there. The chapel was already open. The lights were on, the heating was on, and as soon as I walked in, I felt God is here. I felt this service is going to be blessed, and I felt that it was. And again there was appreciation, there was warmth in the singing, and one of the congregation said to me afterwards, "As far as I'm concerned, you can come and preach every week." Well, I haven't been invited back by the minister, but it is a memory to cherish that one service I was there. Well, what were these churches and what did they have in common? Well, they have been Methodist, Evangelical, Strict Baptist, Pentecostal, Presbyterian, Baptist, such different traditions. What did they have in common? They made me feel that they wanted me there. And I think that's one of the things that draws a person back to a church, whether to worship or to preach. You feel that the people want you there. You are welcome. But in these chapels, I also felt that God himself was already there, and that the services had the touch of God upon them. Now, if you go to this website, you will find a lot more to read or to watch or to listen to. May God bless you.